Hello and welcome to Engineering Ethics at NJIT. I'm Daniel Estrada, and this is the Hangout video for Lesson 5. Hangout videos are sort of open office hours for my online-only students. You can come to office hours, which are on Tuesday at 1 o'clock, but I'm also here in this video Hangout to answer any questions you have, to chat about the course topics. The course content, the lesson for the week. So if you want to come by, I'm here from 1 to 2 every Wednesday. Currently, there's no one who's shown up today, and that's fine. I'm still gonna have a Hangout word. I'll tell you the Hangout word right now. It's it's whistleblowers. Whistleblower, singular. Whistleblower is your Hangout word for this week. There was a little bit of confusion about the Hangout word last week. I was actually hoping that some of that confusion would bring students into the Hangout this week to clear it up. But I've regraded the Hangouts for last week so that the proper words are being used. Be careful to distinguish between the lecture word, which shows up in the Prezi, and the Hangout word, which I'll say in the Hangout video. So the Hangout word for this week is whistleblower. And the lesson for this week is about whistleblowing. So let me jump into the lesson just really quickly. I'm not going to say too much about content this week, because I say most of what I want to say about content in the actual lecture video. But the lesson this week is about whistleblowing. Our Prezi this week goes over lots of different cases of whistleblowers. Ernst Fitzgerald with the C5A. Cost overruns. Dan Applegate in the DC-10 is the cargo doors that exploded that resulted in the plane going down. These are sort of famous whistleblowing cases in engineering. We also talk a little bit in the lecture video about Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. And just to update you, in the lecture video, which I recorded last year, Chelsea Manning was still in prison. She was currently undergoing a hunger strike. But Obama is one of the last acts of, as president. Obama pardoned Chelsea Manning. So now Chelsea Manning is out in public. She has a Twitter account. Her emoji game is very strong. But I wanted to just emphasize this difference between Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden is that Chelsea Manning, after she leaked all her documents, she then turned herself in and faced the legal repercussions, which involved her being in jail for several years. Being tortured for parts of that. So she faced these serious repercussions. It's because she sort of stood up to the responsibility that she was eventually pardoned by Obama. And this is dramatically different for Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden leaked a bunch of information and then ran away to China and then Russia, where he's currently in an embassy, a Brazilian embassy in Russia, where he's not allowed to leave. If the US catches him, then they'll bring him back to the United States and try him for espionage. And he's unlikely to be pardoned because he didn't face trial in the first place, which Chelsea Manning did. So reflecting on these cases, the outcome of these cases might be interesting if you're thinking about whistleblowing. But I wanted to, for this Hangout, talk about one other case of whistleblowing, which I mentioned in my live classes but haven't talked about in this class. And I actually wanted to do it I actually wanted to do this last week, and I didn't get a chance to do this last week because last week was the anniversary of the event that this Stanislav Petrov. So Stanislav Petrov, he's not a whistleblower, but he did defy orders, and in many ways deserves the same kind of praise as a whistleblower. Same kind of act of bravery. This is an event that happened in the height of the Cold War, 1983, on September 26th. So what happened is Stanislav Petrov was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Force. So he was a Soviet officer, and he was in charge of one of the nuclear detection facilities where we were monitoring, where the Russians were monitoring U.S. Nuclear activity. So when the U.S. sets off a nuclear weapon, there's signatures that you can tell the explosion and so on. You can tell if you're watching for these things. And so Stanislav Petrov was in a Soviet airbase monitoring potential U.S. Attacks. It's important to understand that this is the height of the Cold War, where tensions between the United States and Russia were at a all-time high, and in particular, the U.S. was kind of goading the Russians on. We were running all sorts of military operations designed to test the nuclear capabilities of Russia. So we would do things like fly a squadron of bombers straight to Russian airspace, and then at the very last minute turn them around. And the idea is not just to sort of psych them out, although that's part of it, but also to see what do they do in response, what planes do they launch, what missiles do they launch in response. So that way we have an idea of their response capabilities, and so we have a better sense of what's going on. So this is the Cold War, where the United States and Russia, two nuclear superpowers, played chicken with each other on a regular basis. They said that the U.S. was conducting these kinds of operations sometimes several times per week, right? So tensions were high, people were on guard, they were literally playing chicken with nuclear weapons. And that's the background of what happens with the Stanislav Petrov incident. So what happened in 1983 is that there was a false alarm where the Soviet alarm system detecting these early launches went off. The alarms went off, suggesting that there was a launch against Russia. The alarms indicated that 1 or maybe up to 5 missiles had been launched. Once you detect that these missiles are launched, you have 15 minutes to initiate a counter response. And that means that they have 15 minutes to confirm that these are in fact attacks, and then decide on what the response would be, and then actually initiate that response. They have 15 minutes for that whole time period to go through. So Stanislav Petrov says in interviews afterwards that as soon as those alarms go off, he knows that he needs to be on his game, and he needs to be very careful about the decisions that he makes. And that means not just that he makes fast decisions, not just that he responds quickly, but that he makes the right decision, because the right or the wrong decision here could mean the difference between nuclear war with another superpower. But time was an issue, and he needed to make a good decision quickly. So, like I said, the alarms were saying that 1, maybe 5 missiles were being launched, and he knew from his playbooks when they were strategizing about what this kind of situation would look like, he knew that if the United States was attacking Russia, it would be a full-scale attack. This was the policy at the time. It was mutually assured destruction. Right, the idea is, that if there's any attack, the full-scale launch of the counterattack would so completely devastate everyone, potentially to the point of destroying all life on the planet, and that those consequences are so severe that no one would enter the first launch. Which this is the policy. This is why the Cold War was the way it was. And so the playbook on the Russian side was that if the United States was going to launch, they were going to launch a full-scale attack. And the fact that there was only 1 or maybe 5 missiles being launched, Stanislav Petrov was like, no, that can't be right. It must be a false alarm. So instead of notifying his superior officers who he knew were sort of very aggressive towards the United States and would probably go through with a counterattack, full-scale response, because he knew that that's how his commanders would probably decide the situation, he decided for himself to call it as a false alarm and not notify his superiors. And it was a good thing he did, because it was in fact a false alarm. What it was a rare alignment of sunlight on high altitude clouds and satellites, right? So, right, you're getting these flashes in your sensors, and the flashes could be missiles, but they could also be glare off the sun. And in this case, it was glare. The United States hadn't launched anything. And so Stanislav Petrov, he made the right call, right? And it wasn't the call that his orders would have made, right? In some sense, it wasn't his call to make. His job in this position was to kick the alarms up the ladder so that his superior officers know about the incident. He also knew that his superior officers would probably launch a counterattack, so he decided for himself to identify it as a false alarm and cut it off there. Now, he was initially, just for the aftermath, he was initially praised by his superior officers for making the right call. But after that, he was not as praised. He was eventually reprimanded for not notifying his superior officers, which was what he was supposed to do according to his job. He eventually left his job. Let me go back to his. So he eventually left his job. It says that he suffered a nervous breakdown later in life. He wasn't forced out of his job, he says, but he was reassigned to a less sensitive post. Right, so he makes the right call, and because he makes the right call, he's punished for it because it also doesn't follow the orders. Right, so it's a great example of he's not a whistleblower because he's not informing people of a safety concern. What he's doing is he's withholding some information that could be falsely taken as a safety concern. And so, but it's the same kind of brave act where he's, in some sense, standing up to the chain of command. He's standing up to his country. Right, his country's bloodthirsty for nuclear war, and it all rests on him. All right, these kinds of cases. These are the kinds of cases that matter for thinking about whistleblowing. Oh, someone showed up. Hello. Hello. I guess while I'm waiting for her to get into the video chat. So part of this lesson is thinking about all these whistleblowing cases. Another big part of this lesson is thinking about these criteria on whistleblowing from DeGeorge and Birch. And I talk in the lecture about that. But another thing that comes up in the lecture, and I just wanted to highlight, maybe for the Hangout video also, is that the textbook has some common sense procedures for what to do if you're in a case where you think whistleblowing might be an issue, or just where you think there's a safety concern that might require more dramatic action than just your sort of normal operations. And the textbook discusses some common sense procedures. Always try working through normal channels. Again, this isn't always an option for certain cases. Right? I mean, if normal channels result in you being fired for raising these safety concerns, then maybe working through normal channels isn't the right way of addressing those concerns. Textbook says be prompt, right? Don't let things sort of hang around for a while and fester. The longer you let things fester, the harder it is to raise a concern. The book recommends being tactful and low-key, avoid personal criticisms. This goes back to something we talked about last week in terms of conflict resolution. As much as possible, keep your superiors informed, be accurate with claims, keep formal records documenting events. And this is the thing that I wanted to focus on, is the keeping of formal records. So document things. If you are in a situation where you think there's a safety concern and you think it might be an issue, a legal issue, an issue for your job, safety issue that you might, that regulators might get involved. One of the best things you can do to help protect yourself, apart from getting a lawyer, from talking to union representatives, other people that are looking after your interests, is keeping documents of what happens. Right? Maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to people but you can document things that happen. And I just wanted to give a personal story from this. I teach in summers. I teach at a summer camp for high school students, and teaching, working with minors in any way raises a whole host of legal concerns, whole host of safety concerns for children. It also means that lots of other parties are involved, like parents, and these create complications in the workplace. And the way that I've been working at the summer camp for 10 years, over 10 years, and the way that I've managed all the different issues that arise is by documenting everything. This is actually part of the company policy, but I've seen it work several times. You document everything. They have a little standard form. It's called a concern incident medical report. So basically anything that happens, anything that's of concern, any incident that might be a problem, including like a medical problem. So if kids get into a fight, or if someone falls and scrapes a knee, that falling and scraping a knee, it might not be a big deal right now, but it might also be a medical issue later on. And if we have a documentation of it, then we can address it. We can address it earlier, and then any issues that arise are easier to deal with when there's that documentation. So for example, if one of my students calls another student in class a name on Monday, just calling someone a name, it might not seem like a big deal, but if it results in a fight in the lunchroom on Wednesday, so if Wednesday comes around, there's a fight in the lunchroom, and I haven't said anything about this issue at all, then it's, where did this come from? For the administrators, it seems like it's out of left field, and then they're going to be calling on me, why didn't I say something earlier? Why didn't I know that this was an issue before? But if when I saw that student call the other student a name in class, and I documented it, then hopefully the issue gets dealt with right then. But if there does end up being that fight in the lunchroom on Wednesday, then I've shown attention to it. I've, in some sense, sort of kicked the problem up to the administrators. So if that fight happens on Wednesday, it's not just my fault. It's the whole administration's fault for not having dealt with the issue that I've raised sooner. So if I don't raise that issue sooner, then a lot of the responsibility and questions fall on me. And if I just document it, just writing it down, what happens, so that I'm keeping records, those records can be used to verify that you were paying attention. Those records can be used in a court situation where responsibility, right? I mean, if I've been keeping those records, if I have documentation showing that I've been on top of the issue, then the responsibility, it looks a lot more like it's the administration's fault for not addressing those concerns than it's my fault for not even being aware of them, right? So when you keep documentation, in some sense, you're keeping a safety net in case anything blows up bigger. The DC-10 Apple case, just because I haven't gone over it yet. Oh, by the way, if you want to interrupt, I'm sort of talking. If you want to say hi, or if you had any questions. Okay. The word for this week is whistleblower, which I'm happy to tell you since you've taken the time to show up. And we've just been going over all these whistleblower cases. The Dan Applegate DC-10 case. It's one of these cases where the documentation matters. So Dan Applegate, he knew that there was these cargo door failures. He had written memos expressing his concern about the cargo doors. He had drawn up designs about how to fix the cargo doors, and he'd let everyone in his company know that this was a problem. When the plane fell out of the sky and investigators were going around figuring out, okay, so what went wrong? The fact that there was all this documentation made the company look very guilty, especially because the company that he worked for, which was Convair, who were responsible for those doors, but they were just a contractor for McDonnell Douglas, who was building the whole plane. And Convair, although they knew about the cargo door problem, they didn't let McDonnell Douglas know that they knew about this problem. So McDonnell Douglas was clueless, and then their planes fall out of the sky, and when they're like, well, what's wrong? There's all this documentation that shows that the engineers at Convair, they knew that the problem, and it was the administration that didn't follow through responsibly and let McDonnell Douglas know that there was this issue, right? And do something to fix it. And in those records, it's very clear that the reason Corvair didn't do anything about it is because they were worried that if they addressed the cargo door problem, it would result in cost overruns, it would result in delays in keeping with the contract that they have. And because they didn't want to violate these contract concerns, these time concerns and cost concerns, they let the unsafe product go through, a product they knew to be unsafe, and results in a bunch of people dying. So in this case, again, it looks like Dan Applegate did some things that he should have done to let people know. Maybe he could have done more, though. Maybe he should have blown a whistle. Blown a whistle here would mean going outside the normal channels, so not just letting his bosses know inside his company, but maybe he should have let McDonnell Douglas know, an anonymous email showing the design flaws to the engineers over at McDonnell Douglas. It might have had gotten them to stop the problem before it became a plane falling out of the sky. Okay, I don't want to keep talking too long. A lot of this material is in the lecture. I just wanted to be here to answer questions if anyone had them. And in general, I will be here in the video chat for the hour to answer any questions you have. It'll kind of be like an office hour. So questions about your grades, questions about the assignments, if you just want to chat about the material. And not all of that needs to be recorded. I just wanted to throw the Hangout up to see if anyone's showing up. Okay, so I'm going to stop there then. You have the Hangout word. I'm going to stop recording and probably go just sit in the video chat and wait for, see if anyone else comes in and has any questions. Does that sound good to you? Good?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Okay, I'm stopping recording now.
Some of this material now, actually. Just submitted my quiz. So this week, the quiz is actually an essay, I think I saw.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, here we go. Okay. Quiz, we need to write a short 200+ word response evaluating case of whistleblowing from your textbook. Multiple choice questions. Your post should be normal. Your post should be of normal length, dealing with the themes. Okay, so that's the separate usual post there.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so the quiz, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's just another case study apart from the ones that we go over lecture for you to consider and just give a response to it about a paragraph length.
Evaluating a case of whistleblowing from your textbook. Okay.
I believe this is the Edgerton case. Yeah, so it's just another case from.
Okay, I haven't gotten that far yet.
I'll just forewarn you that there's one more paragraph quizzes like this for for lesson 7.
Okay.
Next week will be a normal quiz, but then unit 7 will be another paragraph response.
Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry, thought I had company. Thought I had a student coming in. Okay, good to know. Good to know. That's going to take me some time.
Yeah, one other thing is that it does also take a little time for me to grade. Those aren't automatically graded like the regular quizzes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's good to keep in mind too, because I'm like stalking my grade over here.
Yeah.
Stalking my grade. So okay, good to know. No, I don't have anything further at the time, and I'm actually gonna. Is it in here? Okay. I have a student coming in, so I have to go.
Yeah. Thank you for showing up.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
And I'll see you next week, same time, same bat channel.
Excellent.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye.